He doesn't love you anymore." The sentence hit Jessica with the force of a punch in the gut, spoken by a voice she barely recognized as her own. She was standing in front of the bathroom mirror, her hand resting on her still flat belly, the positive pregnancy test forgotten on the marble sink. Outside, the apartment door closed. Michael had arrived. The sound of his expensive shoes on the hardwood floor was a clock ticking down the time she no longer had. Their 4-year marriage had become a long, silent hallway. Jessica, 32, marketing manager, knew the power of narratives. She knew how to build a brand, how to sell an idea, how to create an emotional connection. But the connection with her own husband, Michael, 38, had broken. The thread was loose, dangling in the void. He didn't look at her anymore. Not really. His eyes passed over her, as if she were part of the pricey furniture in their apartment overlooking the ocean in Miami Beach. Conversations were logistical monologues about bills to pay and schedules to keep. "I'm heading to New York on Tuesday, back on Thursday. Urgent meeting with investors. The Orlando project got extended." The excuses were always vague, professional, unquestionable. They were walls. That night he entered the bedroom and didn't notice she wasn't in bed. The closet light flicked on, and she heard the zipper of a suitcase opening. Another trip. He emerged already changed, wearing a linen shirt she'd never seen. "Need to go to Orlando again," he said, not meeting her eyes, focused on his watch buttons. Unexpected issue with the project. Jessica felt a contraction at the base of her throat. "Again? You just got back." His head lifted minimally. Irritation flashed on his face, a thin crack in his mask of indifference. "Jessica, it's work. You know how it is." She didn't know. Not anymore. His work used to be something they shared, discussed, celebrated. Now it was a locked safe. "Okay," she replied, her voice lower than intended. He grabbed the carry-on and headed for the door. No kiss, no "take care," just a quick wave over his shoulder. "Lock the door." The door closed. The click of the lock was final. Jessica stood in the middle of the bedroom. The air felt thick, hard to breathe. She walked to the window, watching Michael's car pull out of the garage and disappear down Ocean Drive. Orlando. The lie had a city name. An impulse, cold and irrational, overtook her. She grabbed her phone. The car insurance app was there, forgotten in a utilities folder. She'd never used it. Opened it. Login, password. The vehicle's location blinked on the screen, a blue dot pulsing. It wasn't on the road to Orlando. The dot was fixed in South Beach. Her breath caught in her chest. South Beach, a luxury neighborhood, beaches, parties, and high-end hotels. 25 minutes from where she was, the tremor started in her hands. She tried to hold the phone steadier, but her fingers wouldn't fully obey. The screen showed a map. The blue dot was stopped over the address of one of the area's most exclusive hotels, a place where dinners cost the equivalent of a minimum wage salary, and suites were booked months in advance. She didn't think, just acted. Changed clothes, slipping into a simple black dress. Grabbed her own car keys. No plan, just a visceral need to see, to confirm what her body already knew. Driving there was a blur. The city lights streaked past the windows like neon streaks. With every mile, a voice in her head screamed to turn back, not to go. To leave the lie intact, because maybe the truth was unbearable. But her arms stayed firm on the wheel, guiding the car toward the blue dot on the map. When she arrived, she parked at a safe distance. The hotel was imposing, a fortress of glass and warm lights. She got out of the car and felt her legs weak, as if gravity pulled her to the ground. Took a deep breath. The salty night air brought no relief. She entered the lobby, discreet, no one noticed. Followed the flow of well-dressed people toward the restaurant. The sound was muffled. Silverware, low conversations, ambient music that seemed to mock her. And then, she saw him. Michael was seated at a table near the window, overlooking the illuminated pool. He wasn't alone. The woman across from him was young, elegant, wearing a red dress that contrasted with her tanned skin. Gold bracelets gleamed on her wrist every time she gestured. They laughed. His laugh was loud, loose, a laugh Jessica hadn't heard in years. He raised his wine glass, toasting with her. And then he reached across the table and held her hand. His thumb caressed the back of the woman's hand. An intimate gesture, a gesture that once was hers. In that second, time stopped. The restaurant sound vanished. The lights dimmed. All that existed was that image, her husband, the father of the child she carried, loving someone else. Jessica didn't cry, she didn't scream. She froze. A layer of ice formed over her skin. She felt her own heart beat slowly, a muffled, distant drum. She just observed, memorized the woman's face, Michael's smile, the way he looked at her. She turned, walked out of the hotel step by step, spine straight, every movement deliberate, mechanical. Back to the car, sat in the driver's seat and stayed there in silence, staring at nothing. The pain didn't come in waves. It came as a solid weight, settling deep in her chest. An anchor. She carried that pain back home, along with a baby he didn't even know existed. That night, she didn't sleep. Sat in the living room armchair, in the dark, and waited for the sun to rise. When the first rays of light entered through the window, a decision had formed. It wasn't about revenge, it was about survival. She wasn't going to make a scene. She was going to investigate. The coldness that overtook her in the hotel didn't leave. On the contrary, it seized every cell of her body. It was armor. In the following days, Jessica operated with surgical precision. Michael called, voice casual. "Work here is intense. Might need to stay through the weekend." "Okay," she replied, voice neutral. "Focus on your work." While he was away, she started digging. The starting point was the company, a mid-sized construction firm his father had founded. He was the CEO, the all-powerful. Jessica, as marketing manager, had limited access but knew the structure, knew the people. Started with the basics, his travel expenses. She didn't have direct access but knew who did. Laura, from finance. A woman in her late 50s who'd been with the company from the start and had a special fondness for Jessica. She invited her for coffee, didn't mention the betrayal, talked about the future, about the pregnancy that wasn't visible yet, talked about her concern for finances, now that a baby was on the way. "I just want to understand the company's direction better," Jessica said, stirring sugar into her cappuccino. "Michael's so stressed, so focused on these trips. Worried if the projects are yielding the expected return." Laura looked at her sympathetically. "He's always been ambitious, sometimes too much." Jessica leaned in a bit. "These trips to Orlando seem to cost a fortune. The expense reports must be huge." A flicker of something, discomfort, passed through Laura's eyes. "They're detailed." Jessica felt it. That was it. "I trust you, Laura. If something was wrong, you'd tell me, right?" Laura hesitated, looked around. "Jessica, don't get involved in this for your own good." The confirmation came like an electric shock. It wasn't just betrayal. There was more. "Laura, I'm pregnant," she said, voice firm. "My child's future depends on this company's stability. If Michael's doing something reckless, I need to know." Laura's loyalty was divided, but the mention of the founder's grandchild, a future she'd helped build, weighed more. That night, Jessica received an anonymous email. A file, password protected. The password was Neptune 1986, the name of his father's first boat and the year the company was founded. She opened it. Spreadsheets, expense reports, scanned invoices. The trips to Orlando were a facade. The hotels were in New York, Los Angeles, luxury resorts in the Keys, expenses inflated. Business dinners for 5 people costing the price of 10, luxury car rentals for weeks when meetings lasted 2 days. And then she saw the name. Consulting. A marketing and events consulting firm received monthly payments, high amounts, justified as new market prospecting and competitor analysis. The firm name was VR Consulting. Jessica typed the name into Google. The first result was a LinkedIn profile, Victoria Reed. The profile photo made the air vanish from her lungs. It was the woman from the restaurant, the red dress, the confident smile, the mistress. Her bio was impressive. Graduated from top schools with a list of successful projects, but her firm, VR Consulting, had been registered just 6 months ago, and its only client appeared to be Michael's construction company. It wasn't just an affair, it was a scheme. Michael wasn't just cheating on his wife, he was stealing from his own company, using business trips to meet the mistress and at the same time diverting money to pay for her through a ghost consulting firm. The expense overbilling covered the luxuries. The consulting was her salary. Jessica closed the laptop. Nausea rose, strong. She ran to the bathroom but didn't vomit, just stayed there, kneeling, head against the cool wall, breathing ragged. The man she'd married didn't exist. In his place was a stranger, a thief, a pathological liar who underestimated her so deeply it was surreal. He thought she was stupid, a docile wife, waiting at home, oblivious to everything. She stood, washed her face with ice-cold water, looked at her reflection in the mirror, eyes sunken but expression hard, determined. He wouldn't see her cry. He wouldn't get the satisfaction of an emotional confrontation. She had the evidence and knew exactly what to do with it. Michael's return was as anticlimactic as his departure. He entered the apartment Sunday night, tossed the suitcase on the floor and sighed, a performative sound of exhaustion. "Brutal week," he announced to the empty room, expecting sympathy that wouldn't come. Jessica was in the kitchen, finishing tea. She didn't turn. Just the soft clink of the spoon against porcelain answered him. He appeared in the doorway, loosening his tie. "Not even a hi?" "Hi," she said, voice flat, emotionless. She turned and faced him. For the first time in months, she saw him truly, not as the absent husband, but as the man from the spreadsheets, the man from the restaurant in South Beach. The linen shirt, the same one when he left, was slightly rumpled. His scent was a mix of his usual expensive cologne with something else, something that didn't belong in their home. "Something happen?" he asked, brow furrowed in false concern. He was probing, trying to gauge her mood. "No. Just a long week," she replied, using his words against him. She passed by him, body swerving to avoid contact, and went to the bedroom. The distance she imposed that night was different. Not the hurt distance of before. It was cold, clinical. Michael sensed the shift in the atmosphere. He tried an approach in bed, hand seeking her waist under the duvet. Jessica shifted, turning away, creating an abyss of sheets between them. His hand hovered in the air a moment before retreating. He didn't insist. The silent rejection was more potent than any fight. In the days that followed, Jessica lived a double life. To the world and to Michael, she was the same. Went to work, attended meetings, smiled when needed, but inside, she was a strategist. Spent sleepless nights no longer from the pain of betrayal, but from meticulous data analysis. Crossed trip dates with payments to Victoria's consulting. Every overbilled invoice was a puzzle piece. Every email exchanged between Michael and finance, which Laura continued to leak discreetly, was confirmation. The scheme was more ingenious than it first seemed. Michael wasn't just diverting money to the mistress. He used VR consulting to launder part of the money from side deals with suppliers, inflating construction budgets, and receiving kickbacks legalized through fake service contracts. The mistress wasn't just a mistress, she was an accomplice, a front in his corruption scheme. While assembling this silent dossier, her body started sending its own signals. Constant fatigue she attributed to stress, sudden aversion to coffee smell, her favorite drink, and then the absence. The cycle that never failed, now delayed. Initial fear was a chill down her spine. Not now. Please. Not now. She bought the drugstore test at lunch, in a pharmacy far from her neighborhood, as if buying something illicit. Hid the small box at the bottom of her bag. The idea of being pregnant at that moment seemed a cruel twist of fate, bringing life into the world just as her world crumbled. That night, waited for Michael to sleep. The sound of his heavy breathing in the next room was the soundtrack to her loneliness. Went to the bathroom, locked the door. Hands shook so much she could barely open the package, followed instructions, heart pounding in her throat, and waited. The 3 longest minutes of her life. When the 2 pink lines appeared, clear, undeniable, Jessica didn't feel the explosion of joy she'd always imagined. She felt a deep silence take over everything. Sat on the bathtub edge, test in hand, and looked at her reflection in the chrome faucet. a distorted image. She was pregnant. A life was growing inside her, a life half hers, half the man who betrayed and stole from her. Happiness and dread mixed into a single, suffocating emotion. Her hand instinctively went to her belly. A protective gesture. Suddenly the investigation, spreadsheets, betrayal, everything gained new dimension. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about the defenseless future she carried. The irony was brutal. Just when she'd need his support most, the partner, the father, he was most absent, most distant, living a secret life of luxury and lies. The idea of telling him was unthinkable. How could she share the most intimate news of her life with a stranger? How look into his eyes and say, "We're having a baby," knowing those same eyes looked at another woman with love? The pregnancy became her best-kept secret, a source of strength and vulnerability. Morning sickness was real, but she masked it. Nausea came in waves, and she learned to control them, breathe deep, lock herself in the office bathroom for minutes until they passed. Pregnancy was her anchor and her engine. Kept her grounded but propelled her forward, to the conclusion of what she'd started. Michael, immersed in his arrogance, noticed nothing. He saw what he wanted. A quiet wife, maybe a bit more tired, but above all, compliant. Lack of conflict made him comfortable. He interpreted her silence as resignation, not preparation for war. "You're so quiet lately," he commented one night, while watching a movie neither paid attention to. "Just tired," she replied, eyes fixed on the screen. "Maybe take a vacation, go to a spa, I'll pay." The offer was guilt-driven, a cheap conscience cleaner. Pay for her to go away so he could have the house to himself. "No need, I'm fine," she said. And for the first time, she felt a pang of pity for him. He was so predictable. So blinded by his own cleverness, he couldn't see the storm brewing right in front of him. The investigation was nearly complete. Jessica had everything. Spreadsheets, invoices, consulting contracts, trip dates matching payments. Missing the final piece. Irrefutable proof linking Michael not just to fraud, but to the partners he was also deceiving. The opportunity came unexpectedly. The company would hold its semi-annual board meeting. In it, Michael would present results, new projects, and of course budgets for the next period. Among board members were the two minority partners, longtime friends of his father, men who'd watched him grow and trusted him with the family legacy, Richard and Albert. Jessica knew that was her chance. Presenting evidence directly to them would be the final blow. A clean, professional strike leaving no room for denial. She spent the week before the meeting finalizing the dossier, organized everything into a clear, concise presentation. Facts, numbers, documents. No emotion, no personal accusations about the affair. Just corporate fraud exposed unquestionably. It was the language they'd understand, the language of money, breached trust, business risk. On the eve of the meeting, while giving final touches to the presentation on her laptop at the dining table, Michael came home early. He saw her focused and approached from behind. "Working late?" he asked, voice curious. Jessica closed the laptop quickly, heart racing. "Just finishing a marketing project." He eyed the closed screen, suspicious. "You've been very mysterious." She stood, forcing a smile. "Big campaign. Surprise." He didn't seem convinced, but let it go. That night, tension in the apartment was palpable. Silence before battle. Jessica barely slept, mind replaying every planned step. She wasn't afraid. Discovering the pregnancy had annihilated fear, replaced it with steel determination. She was fighting for two now. Tomorrow, Michael's world built on lies and arrogance would collapse, and it would be toppled by the woman he belittled, the woman secretly carrying his child. The board meeting day dawned grey and humid, a perfect reflection of the climate settling in the apartment. Jessica woke before the alarm, body tense, mind sharp. Michael still slept, an oblivious, tranquil figure in the vast bed. For a moment, she watched him, trying to find any trace of the man she'd married. There was none. Just a stranger whose rhythmic breathing seemed to mock the storm about to crash over him. She got up silently, care not to make noise now a habit with new purpose, not waking the enemy too soon. In the bathroom, morning sickness hit hard. She leaned on the sink, breathing deep, waiting for the wave to pass. Looked at her face in the mirror. Subtle, dark circles under her eyes, but they gleamed with feverish intensity. Pregnancy, her secret and strength, was a low fire keeping her upright. Today, she wasn't just Jessica, marketing manager. She was a mother protecting her child's future. This transformation gave her clarity she'd never had. Fear from the night before dissipated, replaced by icy calm, absolute certainty of what needed doing. She dressed with military precision, black tailored pants, white silk blouse, well-cut blazer, professional armor. The dossier was saved on an encrypted thumb drive in her bag, a time bomb waiting for the right moment. When she left the bedroom, Michael was in the kitchen, already suited, pouring coffee. The strong brew smell turned Jessica's stomach, but she showed nothing. "Morning," he said, executive voice activated. "Big day today." Excitement shone in his eyes, arrogance of a man believing total control, about to present feats and secure more power. "Yes, big day," she agreed, voice neutral, grabbing an apple. The word's duality hung in the air, but he, blinded by ego, missed it. "I'll present the Northeast Expansion Project. Richard and Albert will be impressed with the numbers," he continued, boasting. "Victoria's consulting did impeccable prospecting work." Jessica tasted metal in her mouth, hearing her name said so naturally, proudly. He was rubbing the fraud in her face without knowing. She just nodded, bit the apple, and walked away. "Need to go. Early meeting." "See you at the office," he said, already distracted, reviewing notes on his tablet. The drive to the company was surreal. Miami streets, the bridge, familiar scenery, all seemed from another life. In the car, Jessica reviewed the plan. She wouldn't crash the board meeting. That would be dramatic, impulsive. Her strategy was subtler, smarter. She'd scheduled an urgent marketing alignment 15 minutes with Richard and Albert, 30 minutes before the main meeting with Michael. Excuse was approving emergency budget for a digital campaign. Plausible. Her job. Arriving at the company, the executive floor air was charged with tense formality. Secretaries hurried, coffee and paper smell everywhere. Jessica saw Michael enter his office, door closing behind. He was in his natural habitat, king in his castle. She went straight to Richard's office, knocked. "Richard, it's me, Jessica. We have those 15 minutes. Richard, a man in his mid-60s with a weary but sharp gaze, opened the door. "Jessica, sure, come in." "Albert's already here." Albert, the other partner, more outgoing and energetic, sat in an armchair. Both greeted her with paternal affection. They'd known her since she started dating Michael. Seeing her there, professional and serious, was routine. "So, what's the urgency?" Albert asked, smiling. Jessica closed the door. Adrenaline pulsed in her veins, but her voice came calm, controlled. "The urgency isn't marketing. It's the company. And I ask that, before anything, you listen to the end. For the memory of Michael's father and this place's future." The tone shift was immediate. Smiles vanished. Formality gave way to acute attention. Richard adjusted in his chair. "You're scaring us, Jessica." "What happened?" She didn't answer with words. Opened her bag, took the thumb drive, plugged it into Richard's laptop on the desk. "I discovered some things. Things that unfortunately involve Michael." In 10 minutes, she presented everything. The laptop screen showed spreadsheets, graphs she'd made, copies of inflated invoices, VR consulting contracts. She narrated facts clinically, pointing dates, amounts, inconsistencies, showed Victoria Reed's firm registration, creation date, absence of other visible clients, didn't mention Mistress. No need. Connection obvious and, for this conversation, irrelevant. The crime was fund diversion, fraud, fiduciary trust breach. As she spoke, room silence grew heavier. Richard and Albert's faces went from concern to disbelief, then cold, contained fury. Richard, with the mouse, clicked files, opening invoices, comparing payment reports. Albert stood and paced, hand over mouth, gaze on the floor. When Jessica finished, sepulchral silence took over. Richard removed his glasses, rubbed his eyes, looked at her with horror mixed with reluctant admiration. "Jessica, why are you doing this?" he asked, voice low, almost whisper. "He's your husband." Jessica met his gaze, spine straight, hand discreetly on her belly. "Because this company was his father's dream, and because my loyalty is to the truth, not who hides it. And above all, because I won't let my family's future be built on lies and theft." Family carried weight only she fully understood. At that moment, Michael's office door opened in the hall. They heard his voice, animated, greeting the secretary. He was heading to the boardroom, ready for his big show. Albert stopped pacing and looked at Richard. Silent understanding passed between the old partners. Decision made. Richard turned to Jessica. "Thank you. We'll take it from here. Please return to your office and don't mention this to anyone. This will be handled internally, quietly." Jessica just nodded, took her thumb drive, stored it in her bag, stood. Leaving the room, her gaze crossed Michael's at the hall's end, entering the boardroom. He gave a quick, smug smile. A smile of one clueless his world was about to implode. She didn't smile back, just went to her office, closed the door, sat in her chair. The sound of her own heart was all she heard. The bomb was delivered. Now, wait for the explosion. The wait in Jessica's office was an out-of-body experience, time distorted, each minute dragging like an hour. She didn't try to work, just sat, hands clasped on the desk, gaze lost on the city view through the glass window. Outside, life continued normally. Cars moved, people walked, the world in happy ignorance. But there, on the executive floor, a universe was about to collapse. She heard muffled hall sounds, footsteps, phones ringing, distant laugh, and each seemed amplified, loaded with hidden meaning. She wasn't afraid of what would happen to Michael, anxious for the end of the farce, the liberation truth, brutal as it was, would bring. Across the hall in the boardroom, Michael began his presentation with a maestro's confidence conducting his own symphony. He distributed report copies, smiled at Richard and Albert, started his speech on growth, innovation, brilliant prospects from new prospecting strategy in the Northeast. He spoke fluently, citing numbers and projections that, in his mind, proved his CEO genius. He didn't notice the partners' unusual quiet. Didn't see they weren't opening his reports but looking at their tablets, where Jessica's dossier was open. Richard let him speak for nearly 20 minutes. Let him deepen the lies, build his house of cards higher. Let him praise VR Consulting's exceptional work, detailing supposed insights Victoria's firm provided. Every word Michael uttered dug his professional grave deeper. Albert, unable to contain fury, kept his face impassive, but fingers drummed silently on the table, rhythmic beat of impatience and contempt. Finally, when Michael paused dramatically before revealing the requested budget for Phase 2, Richard interrupted. "Michael," he said, voice calm but weighted, cutting the room's air. "I have a question about this consulting. VR." Michael seemed surprised by the interruption but smiled, ready to defend his partner. "Sure, Richard. Ask away." Richard didn't look at him, kept eyes on his tablet. "This firm's EIN was registered 6 months ago. The fiscal address is a commercial suite that, per a quick check we just did, is empty. And the only client it seems to have is us. Can you explain how such a new firm, without apparent structure, produced such in-depth prospecting work?" Michael's smile faltered. Uncertainty shadowed his face. He hadn't expected this scrutiny. "Well, they're new, but extremely aggressive. Victoria Reed is a rare talent. She uses a network of contact." "Victoria Reed," Albert interrupted, voice grave, speaking first time. "The same Victoria Reed who traveled with you to a resort in Key West in September, on a trip paid with the company card under meeting with local investors?" Blood drained from Michael's face. He looked from Albert to Richard, and for the first time saw they weren't looking with admiration, but cold, implacable judgment. He realized it wasn't a meeting. It was an ambush. "I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, confidence evaporating, CEO posture crumbling in seconds. Richard then turned the tablet toward him. On screen, not Michael's presentation, but one of Jessica's spreadsheets, travel expenses and consulting payments, highlighted in red side by side. "We know, Michael. We know about the luxury hotels, overbilled dinners, fake contracts. We know you've used this company's money, Your father's legacy to fund your double life and enrich your mistress." The word mistress cut with sharp contempt. Michael gasped as if punched. He stared at the screen, irrefutable proof, and his brain seemed to freeze. Denial impossible. Anger took its place. "Who?" he started, voice a growl. "Who showed you this?" He thought of Laura in finance, some internal rival. His mind listed suspects, but never, not for a second, landed on Jessica. She was invisible in his power and betrayal equation. "The source doesn't matter," Richard said, standing. "What matters is your position as CEO is, from this moment, untenable. You'll be removed from duties immediately, while we conduct a full audit. The board will vote your permanent removal next week, which, given circumstances, will be a mere formality." The execution was silent, brutal, corporate. No shouts, just the sentence in cold business tone. Michael stood frozen, face pale, hands trembling. The man who entered as king was expelled as a criminal. "You can't do this," he whispered, voice weak. "We already have," Albert replied, heading to the door. "An email will go to staff in an hour, announcing you're on sabbatical leave indefinitely. Suggest you pack your things and leave discreetly. It's the last shred of dignity we can offer." As the door closed, leaving Michael alone with his career's wreckage, Jessica in her office received Richard's email. Subject, "Thank you." Body, just one sentence. "It's done." She closed her eyes and released the breath she didn't know she was holding. No joy, no triumph, just the crushing weight of the end. End of her marriage, the illusion, an era. Painful relief, like setting a broken bone. Minutes later, she heard Michael's office door open. She didn't move, just waited. He didn't come to her office, heard his hurried steps to the elevator. He was fleeing, the great CEO, the clever man, fleeing the battlefield he created. While Michael thought he was the smartest player at the table, it was the pregnant woman he underestimated, the silent wife he treated as an accessory, who toppled his empire of lies. And she did it without raising her voice, without shedding a public tear, using the same intelligence and strategy he believed only he possessed. His play was dismantled, checkmate given. Michael's exit from the building was the silent epilogue to his fall. Jessica stayed in her office, an island of calm amid invisible turbulence coursing the company's veins. Richard's email went out on time an hour later, and news of Michael's sabbatical spread like contained shockwave. Whispers started in corners, speculations traded in private messages, but no one knew the true magnitude. The board's discretion, absolute, protected the company's reputation, even while amputating its corrupt leader. To the world, Michael wasn't a thief, just a tired CEO taking time. Only 4 people in the building knew the truth: Richard, Albert, Jessica, and Michael himself. That night, Jessica didn't return to the apartment she'd once called home. She couldn't. The space was contaminated with lie memories, every object a reminder of the farce life. Instead, she drove to a simple, functional hotel downtown, an anonymous place where no one would know her. Checked in, entered the impersonal room, and for the first time in months, allowed herself to feel everything's weight. The armor sustaining her so long began to crack. She sat on the bed edge, hotel room silence enveloping her, and exhaustion hit. Not just physical, soul fatigue from carrying betrayal, investigation, and pregnancy alone. Meanwhile, Michael didn't go home. He drove aimlessly, brain short-circuiting, trying to process his destruction's speed and brutality. Humiliation was hot bile in his throat, stripped of power, status, identity, all in under 30 minutes. His feverish mind sought a culprit, a traitor. And then in his rage chaos he called the one person he believed was on his side, called Victoria. The conversation wasn't as expected. When he told her, voice choked with fury, he'd been removed and her consulting would be investigated. No support or loyalty words. Icy silence on the line, followed by calculated coldness. "That's your problem, Michael. My contract is with the company. If audited, my records are in order. I provided contracted services." Denial instant and total. She was detaching, cutting ties with the same surgical precision he was removed. "Don't call me again," she said before hanging up. The call-end sound was more shocking to Michael than the firing. He realized with nauseating clarity their partnership was never about affection or loyalty. It was business. A business that just went bankrupt. He was alone. Completely, irremediably alone. In that despair abyss, his mind finally turned to the only person left, Jessica. He didn't call from love or remorse, called from habit, desperation, seeking the safe harbor he'd dynamited himself. Jessica's phone rang, Michael glowing on the screen. She looked at the device, heart beating faster, answered but said nothing. "Jessica?" His voice sounded strange, broken. "Where are you? I got home and you're not here." "I'm not home," she replied, voice devoid of emotion. Pause. He expected questions, concern, got only void. "They fired me, Jessica. Richard and Albert. They took me out of the company." He was confessing, seeking the sympathy he'd always gotten. "I know," she said simply. Silence on the line was deep. His already shaken brain struggled to connect dots. How could she know? Unless... Realization hit not as lightning, but slow, icy horror wave. Her quietness last months, the mystery, the scary calm, not resignation, a plan. "It was you," he whispered, accusation mixed with stunned disbelief. "You told them." "I presented the facts," she corrected, voice steel firm. Decisions were theirs. He started yelling. Torrent of accusations, rage, self-pity. Called her traitor, crazy, said she'd destroyed his life. Jessica listened in silence, phone away from her ear. His words no longer hit, just the sound of a man drowning in his choices. When he finally stopped, panting, she said just 2 words. "It's over, Michael," and hung up, blocked his number. In that moment, the last thread tying her to her old life was cut. The next day, she hired a divorce attorney, one of the city's best. Direct and objective. Presented fraud evidence, explaining it would be used not to blackmail but ensure quick, silent, unquestionable divorce. She didn't want his money, wanted her freedom. It was during the first attorney meeting that reality hit anew. The attorney, pragmatic and experienced, started standard questions. "Do you have children?" Jessica took a deep breath. "I'm pregnant." The attorney's expression softened a moment. "Does he know?" "No." The revelation changed dynamics. Pregnancy no longer just personal secret, legal fact, factor-altering divorce, division, future. Attorney explained implications, child support, custody, paternal rights. Michael, despite everything, would have rights over the child. The idea made Jessica's stomach turn. Then Michael, in desperation, made his final mistake. Unable to contact her, he went to the company, hoping to find her, confront her. But his entry was already barred. Humiliated again, he did the only thing his egocentric mind thought. Tried using emotion as weapon, called Jessica's mother. The conversation was a disaster. He told a distorted version, painting himself victim of corporate conspiracy and cold, distant wife. And then, to generate sympathy, said the phrase sealing his fate. "I don't even know what I did wrong. I gave her everything, a good life. And now she abandons me. Maybe it's better. We never had kids. Nothing ties us." Jessica's mother, who knew about the pregnancy from the start, her daughter's only silent support, felt glacial fury. After hanging up, she called Jessica and told what he said. To Jessica, that phrase was final confirmation. Nothing ties us. He'd erased the possibility of a child, their greatest connection, as easily as signing a fake invoice. In that moment, she knew no bridge back, no talk, no redemption chance. She called her attorney. "I want the divorce signed as soon as possible, and sole custody. Use whatever needed." The pregnancy news reached Michael coldest, most impersonal way, through his own attorney's official notification, part of the divorce process. The legal document, with formal words and numbered clauses, informed about the gestation and Jessica's request for unilateral custody, citing improper moral and financial conduct as basis. When Michael read those words, "The petitioner is in a gestational state," The ground vanished beneath him. A child. He was having a child. The information didn't come from his wife's lips in intimacy and joy, but from a stamped paper also announcing his marriage's end and start of legal battle. He collapsed. It wasn't the company loss, public humiliation, Mistress's abandonment. It was the child news. The child he never knew existed. The life he was about to lose before knowing he had it. The weight of all his actions, errors, fell at once. He cried. Cried with a man's force who lost everything, but only now realized what really mattered. Michael's collapse wasn't a single event, but slow, agonizing process. The pregnancy news, delivered by legal documents' coldness, was the catalyst dissolving his last arrogance remnant. He tried calling Jessica dozens of times from different phones, but she didn't answer. Sent long, desperate emails, confused mix of forgiveness pleas, accusations, change promises. Screams of a man who only saw what he had when a signature made it legally lost. He begged to talk, showed up at the hotel she was staying, but reception, instructed by Jessica's attorney, barred entry. Waited in her work parking lot, pathetic figure leaning on his car, once power symbol, now just accessory to his defeat. When Jessica left the building end of day and saw him there, she didn't hesitate. Kept walking to her car, expression neutral. "Jessica, please," he called, voice hoarse. He ran to her. 5 minutes, that's all I ask." She stopped but didn't look directly. Gaze fixed beyond him. "We have nothing to talk about, Michael." "We do. We're having a baby," he said. Baby with mix of dread and wonder. "I messed up. I know I did. I got lost. Corporate world went to my head. Pressure. I was an idiot. Weak. But I can fix it. We can fix it. For our child." It was a rehearsed, desperate speech, classic excuses of a cornered man. But to Jessica, words were hollow, meaningless, just noise. "You didn't get lost, Michael. You made choices," she replied, voice calm but cutting like glass. "You chose to lie every day, chose to disrespect me, chose to steal from the company your father built, and chose to do it all while I carried our child. Those weren't detours, they were decisions." His face contorted in pain. "I regret it. I swear I do. I love you." The love declaration at that moment was the final offense. As false as the invoices he'd signed. "No," she said, finally meeting his eyes, and he saw no anger there, no hurt, just emptiness, space left by a dead feeling. "You don't love me. You love the idea of having me. You love the stability I represented. And now you're afraid of losing your child, but that's not love, it's selfishness." She turned to leave, but he grabbed her arm, his touch repulsive. She pulled back with force that surprised him. "Don't touch me," she ordered, voice low but with unshakable authority. At that moment, Richard and Albert, leaving the building, saw the scene. Albert started toward them, face set protectively, but Richard held his arm, shaking head. This was Jessica's battle. She got in her car and started it. Michael stood watching her drive away, her figure disappearing in evening traffic. Too late. The forgiveness he sought was valueless currency. In following weeks, divorce was signed. Jessica had moved to a new apartment, smaller, brighter, decorated from scratch. A space just hers and her future child's. Meanwhile, company audit revealed full fraud extent. To avoid public scandal tarnishing family and company name, Richard and Albert made a deal. Michael would renounce all shares and profit participation in exchange for board silence on real exit reasons. He left with nothing but legal obligation to pay child support, calculated on a future he no longer had. Then Richard sought Jessica, invited her to a meeting, and with Albert beside, made an unexpected proposal. "Jessica, we saw what you did," Richard said, tone formal but respectful. "Your intelligence, courage, and above all, integrity under unimaginable pressure. Rare qualities. The company needs new marketing leadership, someone who understands our legacy but has future vision, someone we can trust. We'd like to offer you the Director of Marketing position." The offer left her breathless. Recognition of her professionalism, strength, stance, validation she didn't seek but deeply deserved. She accepted. Michael cried when he learned everything. Cried when the bailiff delivered finalized divorce papers. Cried when he saw internal announcement of Jessica's promotion. But his tears weren't for the marriage end. They were for overwhelming realization of who he'd truly lost. He didn't lose just a wife. He lost the woman who silently was stronger, smarter, more capable than he ever was. The partner he should have valued but chose to underestimate. He lost himself in her greatness's reflection. Their last meeting was at the courthouse for a custody conciliation hearing. He was thinner, worn. She, pregnancy now visible, radiated powerful serenity. He tried one last time, voice desperate whisper in the hallway. "I just want you to believe I've changed." Jessica looked at him, hand protectively on her belly, and then she gave him her final sentence, words that would echo in his mind for life. "I don't need you to believe in me. I have a lifetime to show my child what real love is," and turned her back, walking toward her future, leaving him with his choice's ghost. What did you think of this story? From 0 to 10, what rating would you give? Subscribe to the channel and click the bell to get all our stories. And enjoy watching another surprising story by clicking on the screen. Thanks and see you next time.